All right. Hello. Welcome to the Bring Your Big Energy podcast. I am so excited about our today's guest, everyone. Today's guest, Suzanne Roske, is someone that I met at the Hudson Coaching Conference, and I instantly was so inspired by her. I had a full fangirl moment. I'm just gonna be honest. Hearing her story, her brave moves. She was a published author. I didn't know anyone like that, and she just was such an inspiration. Especially her decision to take an adult gap year, which is so cool. We're gonna talk about that today, and how that experience shaped her life. So she is the founder of Vamonos Executive Coaching. She's based just outside Washington, D.C. And Suzanne is a leadership and a life coach. She's also a retreat facilitator. Her retreats are amazing. I have to tell you all. We'll get into that later. But she's just an all around advocate for helping people just to hit pause, to peel back the shoulds, and design lives that feel bold, integrated, and fully alive. So, Suzanne, I'm so thrilled to have you here. Why don't we just start with you giving your background and what lights you up, and then we'll dig in deeper.
Oh my gosh. Well, Stacey, thank you so much. And I am thrilled to be here because I remember meeting you at the Hudson conference and I had this teenage girl, like, ooh, she's cool. I want to be friends with her. So I'm so thankful that one, we are friends, and two, that I am here with you today. And so my bio, in addition to being a leadership and life coach and having Vamonos Executive Coaching as my business, I am a recovering management consultant. I
Mm.
was with a large global consulting firm. I was a partner there. I was there for over 20 years. And when I think back on the experiences, like the hindsight 2020, the pieces that I loved about that role were when I was in a quiet conversation, either with my staff or my team or even my clients. And they could just be real about the issues they were facing, the goals that they had. Like it was the ability to create that space. And if you had asked me at the time, it was nothing about that. It was about achieving the big goals and doing the big things. And I was constantly on that hamster wheel. But now, again, with that 2020, I can say that those were the quiet moments that I really was my absolute best when I was helping other people be their best. And that's the thing, the thread that has consistently lit me up is allowing people to see what they are really capable of. And I'm so privileged that that's what I get to do with my clients now on a daily basis.
I love that. I absolutely love that. So paint the story for us. Management consultant, partner, huge job. And then there's this adult gap year. So I talk about intensity points in my book. As you know, you've read my book. You've been such a great supporter. And I talk a lot about intensity points in my book where everything shifted for someone. Bring us into that chapter for you. Like make that come alive for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to start a little bit before the intensity point because I would
Perfect.
say I'm a little slow on the uptake. It took me a while to pay attention to what my soul and my inner voice was telling me. I would say as I was going through my career, I was always that person that loved going for the next thing, whatever the next carrot was, whatever the next milestone that I had to get to. I was just constantly the striver. And in that striving, I would hear occasionally that little voice would bubble up like in the back of my head. And I would hear this like, really? Is this what you're going to do for the rest of your life? And I was so good at being like, mm-mm, get back down in your box. You just need to be quiet because you have everything that you're working for, or your goal is so close. I mean, and it was to the point, Stacey, that, I was so burnt out and I couldn't even realize it that when I was going through the partner process, I experienced bouts of suicidal ideation.
Mm,
And I got help from a therapist, but I never told anybody. I didn't tell
mm.
my husband. I didn't tell my partners. I didn't tell my friends because the one piece of advice I had been given in going through this partner admission process was just don't F it up. And I
Mm.
felt like if I admitted that I was so stressed that I was having thoughts of potential like harming myself, that people would say, like, either you're not fit for this. That was my fear of my partners. That my husband would say, this is not worth it. And I just didn't know how to say it out loud. And so I just kept going. And so when I say that I'm just a little slow on the uptake, it really took me until 2020 in the depths of COVID where I got to look around the house and wonder to myself, like, this place, I don't know how it stays afloat. Like, how did this joint never spontaneously combust on a daily basis? Because I wasn't here to see it. And I really looked around and I was like, oh my God, this isn't working. And on the day that we got the email that my kids and every other kid in almost the world wouldn't be going back to school in the fall, it was like something from outside of me just took and shook me. That little voice like got up and screamed, you must do better. You have to do better than what you're doing now. And this is not it.
Mm.
And I couldn't ignore or push that voice back down into the box at that moment. And that was the intensity point of like, something has to be done. I just didn't know what it was like in that moment.
So I there's so many things to unpack there, but first of all, like to anyone listening, and I've been there myself, fighting the battles alone because you feel that you're going to be less than or you're damaged. I remember going through that as a director at Google with my mental health issues, and it's very scary. And so I just want to put that out there that none of us are ever alone, but we feel like we are in these situations, and that's
Absolutely.
why I'm having things like this podcast so that we can get those voices out there and normalize that we all struggle. And honestly, we struggle more the more high achieving we are, and we struggle more the higher we go because it's lonely at the top. So I just wanted to say that there. And then you said something that before we go into the gap year, you said I wanted to do better. What does that mean for you?
I mean, in the moment, I had no idea. I knew that I was not showing up as the person that I wanted to be. I think I knew in the back of my mind that I was giving everything I had to my clients and to the firm. And by the time I got to be at home with the people that I would say are the utmost importance to me, I had nothing left to give them. And so I was constantly like yelling and squawking and that is what I was like, this is not where you want to be. There's got to be something that is better. But again, I didn't know what it was. And I think for a long time, even though I had that thought of like, you can do better,
Huh?
I was probably a little bit too comfortable or afraid of not knowing to actually do anything about it. And I think
Right.
that's a phase that we all get into is like, I don't know what that could look like. So I know what, the devil I know versus the devil I don't. And I think that became part of it as I just was like, I don't know.
Well, and not to put this on you, but I remember feeling, and I've talked to a lot of people who felt there's a certain amount of guilt too. Like you have this big, beautiful life, you have this amazing job. Like who wouldn't want to be a partner at a big firm? Who wouldn't want your gorgeous house? Like who wouldn't want this big, beautiful thing? And not that it wasn't beautiful, because there were, I'm sure, a lot of great elements. But there's a certain amount of guilt of like, who are you to want more? Who are you to want
Absolutely.
something different?
Yeah, and I think that's why I was able for so long to push those thoughts down because it
Mm-hmm.
was, you have what others want.
Mm-hmm.
So why do you get to complain?
Right. All right, so you're standing there. It's COVID. We all can go back there. You're standing there in the house. It's you and your spouse, and you've got 3 kids, right?
Yep,
3 kids?
3 kids.
Yep. It's you, your spouse, 3 kids, and you're like, wow, I have not been in the house this much with my people, and I want to do better. Then what comes next for you?
So it was literally that day that the email came in and I just you couldn't focus on anything. And again, that voice was so loud of like, this is it. And I went for a walk. And when I was on this walk, I describe it as like, I don't know if it was like intervention from the universe, but it felt like not a thought that came from me. It felt like it was planted inside of my head of, well, why don't you do something different? Why don't you go somewhere different? Why don't you move? And when I heard that, and again, it's like a hearing. It was like somebody was next to me whispering it. I was like, "Oh my god, we need to move. We don't have to stay here. We can do something different. I can take a pause from work. Nobody's gonna miss me, because nobody knew what the economy was gonna do. I'm sure I was convinced that the firm would be glad to have one less mouth to feed if I stepped away, and I ran home to my husband, and it was like, if he didn't say yes to this idea of moving and doing an adult gap year, I didn't know what we were gonna do. It was like in an instant, and I mean, it was like a 20-minute walk. All of my priorities shifted, and I was attached that this was the only option, and I know it probably wasn't, but in that moment, it felt like the only option. And my husband came home, he had been out on a bike ride, and I said to him, like, I have a crazy idea. Why don't we move? Why don't I take a break and we'll go somewhere? Like, let's move to Mexico." And he looked at me with this quizzical look because I'm the one who has all of the pros and cons lists and like how we can do things, and not he leaves for a bike ride and comes home and I'm like, "Hey, let's move." Um,
No,
and
no spreadsheet involved or
There
anything?
was no spreadsheet whatsoever, not even a list with, like, that I could check things off of, and he looked at me, and it was this look of total perplexion, like, he was seeing me differently, and I'm sure it lasted, like, a beat, but for me, it felt like forever, and I remember just, like, putting my head down, and I was like, "Never mind, that was a crazy idea," and he just said, "Yes, it is crazy, and we're totally gonna do it."
Oh my gosh, I actually have chills, and I've heard this story before, read the book, and I still have chills because there's something there about, like, wanting to do something different, coming from the place that you were in, and then also having someone that's super supportive to say, "This is very out of character for you, but I'm gonna support it because this is what could really fuel us right now." Had you had that sort of divine intervention or universe or, speaking in your ear, had you had anything like that before in the past?
Not that I can remember.
Okay.
Like, I'm very much like, I will go through the spreadsheets, I'll do the pro con list, I'll, analyze everything. And then when I am up for, I've made a decision, I do a real gut check. And my gut generally says, like, yes, this is right. Or even if all of the pros are there, but it feels intuitively wrong, that will nag at me and I'll generally make a different decision. But I don't ever remember something like this. I take it back. I take it back. I remember walking into this house that we live in now. My husband, Bill, was not here to look at the houses, and I just remember, like, turning around and feeling like, "Yeah, this is the place."
Just had a
Like,
gut.
there was just that gut in the moment feeling like this is where we are supposed to be. So I guess maybe I have had it before, but that rational side of me is way stronger than my feeling side, or at least it always had been. And so
Yeah.
I really leaned into rationality before. And I think this was the first time I really allowed, and you know, I don't know if it was the universe or if it was just my true self to be heard.
Mm. Your true self to be heard. I love that. And it came from a moment of pausing and being quiet on your walk, which is, I know, something that's very important for you as you teach your clients. Okay, so you have this conversation and you've got him on board. You got three other people that have on board, and it's a big lift. It's also, we're talking COVID, like people aren't leaving their houses. So the thought of going somewhere and moving, I love it. You know, we did it. We've lived in a van down by the river, as I love to say, in Key West in our RV. So I love that about you. But what'd you do next? How'd you get this off the ground?
So the first thing I had to do, and the first thing Bill said to me is like, who do you need to tell at your
Okay.
firm as like a test balloon? And let's see if this is like just a great idea in concept or if you are going to say it out loud and then instantly regret it. And I remember telling a friend of mine who was another partner, and it felt so light. It just felt like, oh, yes, I need to step away for a period of time from the firm. And it's not going to be 2, 3 weeks. It's going to be an extended period. The actual move to Mexico, I mean, there's power in naivete.
Right?
Like, I
That's
didn't know
fair.
what I didn't know, and so it felt like, "Okay, let me see if I can get a visa for an extended period," and, I mean, we're fortunate, we live right outside of Washington, DC. I could make an appointment at the embassy, we could go and get visas, like, that was not didn't seem like a barrier that was something that we was too hard to overcome. We found a Airbnb and nobody was renting it, so we kind of had an off-channel conversation with the owner to rent a place. No contract, no nothing. Like, we just went, we ordered a bunch of pesos from the Bank of America, had them delivered, and, like, we went down there. Like, "Okay, I hope he says he's gonna pick us up at the airport or send a van for us." Hope and pray that that's gonna happen. And he did. And all of these people were like, "This is crazy. You are gonna get taken advantage of. This is not gonna work out." And we were just like, I just had to believe that people were good and it was gonna work out. I think if I were to, go back with the knowledge that I have today, it would seem like a much bigger lift. But
Yes.
at that point in time, it was just so exciting. And I was just propelled forward. Now, that doesn't mean that I wasn't scared out of my wits because I certainly was. I was terrified. I almost let like the idea of how we were going to navigate our mail being delivered at home to completely throw us off our game and say like, no, we're not going to do it. And fortunately, Bill was like, we are not going to let the US Postal Service stop us. This
That's
is
not what takes us
crazy.
out.
Right, but in my mind, that was the thing that we couldn't figure out how to overcome. It wasn't like the big logistics, it was like, "No, the mail is gonna pile up, and somebody's gonna notice, and
Right.
they're gonna
Right.
rob us, and that's why we
Right.
can't go."
You're right, right. There is again that rational piece and that dreamer piece and that emotional piece, and I know that all of us are sometimes fighting and like you said, looking back where you were then versus now is a very different person, and so and there's a lot to be said there. There's something that you said that I love, which is other people. Other people thought that we were crazy. Other people that were worried. A lot of times, other people can come from a beautiful place, like your mom being like, "What are you doing going to wherever Timbuktu?" So sometimes that can be very helpful, but sometimes it can be a little judgy or the crab in the pot analogy that I love, which is, when a crab tries to climb out of the steaming pot, other crabs will bring it down. And so when we make big, bold moves, I mean, I even feel like this way in my life right now. Like, people in my world are like, "You're doing a podcast? Like, why? Like, what? Like, why are you writing a book? What? Like, why are
Mhm.
you leaving Google?" Like, and so talk to me about that process of other people and how you worked through that piece of it, because I think that's very helpful for all the listeners too.
Yeah, so, I mean, it was really surprising to me. There were people who I thought were going to be totally supportive of this.
Yes.
People who traveled all the time, people who had done international assignments, and in some cases, those were the people who were like, "Ooh, that doesn't sound so smart."
Interesting.
In other cases, like with my parents, I was terrified to tell them.
Hmm.
I was like, "Oh, they're gonna think this is the craziest thing we've ever done." And they were like, "Okay, if this
Yeah.
feels like the right thing for you, go ahead." And so there was this really interesting juxtaposition of people who I thought would be supportive and people who I didn't. And I think that helped a little bit in that the people who were close to me were said, "Yeah, okay, go for it." Um, but I will say there was this idea of I guess maybe it was at that point in time, there were so many people who just felt so stuck that this idea of dreaming really and being the one to do it, there was a lot more support than I thought there would be. Um, but there was this whole concept that I think was harder than the actual taking the adult gap year, which was thinking of reconstructing my life and stepping away from the partnership.
Mm,
And that was the piece where I was really afraid of what other people would think. And I really had to let go of those expectations. Like, it was this idea of trying to keep up with the Joneses all the time. And what I saw when we got to Mexico, there were no Joneses to keep up with. Like, nobody knew who I was, nobody cared what we did. And it allowed me to say, what do I really love to do? And lean into that in a way that was completely divorced of expectations. And so one of the things I work with my clients, because it really is hard, like you're saying, Stacey, to have people view you in one way. And
Mm.
that's how they like to keep us sometimes
Oh,
for
yes.
all the right reasons. They're like, oh, but I know you this way. So
Yes.
let's just stay there. And it's that understanding that it is really hard for people to see us in a different light. But
Yes.
we have to see
Absolutely.
ourselves in that light first before we can allow others to see us that way as well. And so if we're hanging all of our expectations on someone else saying this is a great idea, it's probably not going to get there. But if you can get really behind, like, this is where I'm going and I'm super excited about it, that excitement is sometimes contagious.
Did you ever second guess it along the way?
Oh, every day. Every damn day, I probably second guessed it. And I just had to push myself through it to say, this is the doubt. And the doubt spiral is not going to win today.
Mm.
I mean,
And I
even when we were in Mexico, I doubted. Like, we had already gotten there. And I was like, what are we doing? This is crazy town. Uh, and it was like, I'm trying to get water delivered and I can't figure it out. I've got giant bugs in our house and I'm like, what is this thing? Or maggots are in the kitchen. Like things happen and I was like, oh my God, I could just be at home in Virginia and not have to deal with any of this nonsense. But it was this learning process about I could do much more than I gave myself credit for.
love so let's go there. I love that because there's so much power in that. What did you learn about yourself? And then I would love to know what you learned about your family too, but I'm not gonna stack my questions, but, or what your family learned, but let's start with you. Like, what did you learn about yourself in that time and taking that space?
One of the things I learned was I was not a miserable person. And
Say
for
more.
for such a long time leading up to that intensity point, I had just come to accept that I was miserable. That I was miserable. I would come home, I would yell, I would not be my best self. And I was like, okay, this is the way that it's got to be. Like, this is the job, this is the role, this is the life. And everybody just has to be used to it. And I remember doing this energy audit, like, because I coached myself through my adult gap year. And my
Yes.
kids were like, my kids said, I don't think you know how to do this because you're working harder here than we've seen you work at home. Now, they did have the ability to see me every day. Um, but they were right. I was really focused on like how I was going to figure out what was next and what I called like what I was supposed to be doing. And I did this energy audit and I got so excited. I remember running my husband worked in like the laundry area. We set up a desk for him so it would be quiet. And I remember running out to where the laundry area was and being like, "Oh my god, Bill, guess what? Guess what? I'm burnt out." And I was so excited about it. And he's like, "This doesn't seem like a good thing. Why are you so excited about being burned out?" And I said, "Well, because I can do something about that.
Right,
Like I
you
can make
know what it is now, right? You
one
can
I can
name
make
it.
it and I can make it better. I can like relax. I can figure out strategies to move through burnout. But if I'm a miserable person, y'all are just stuck with the curmudgeon." And
Right.
so that was one thing that was like hugely inspiring is to figure out that I was burnt out. I loved being able to really pause and without anybody else figure out what I like to do.
And what was
What
that? What did you find?
I loved walking. I loved t connecting with that artistic side of myself, even if I stunk at it. I loved sitting in the garden and painting, and I loved trying to, like, just write little things so I would remember what we were doing without any intention of sharing it with anybody else, just to have that creative outlet. I loved it when the women would come by and bring flowers to sell on the street, and I would bring them in and I would make little flower arrangements that just made me happy. So there was this creative side of myself that I really loved. I loved going to the market and trying to speak Spanish and understand what the woman was saying to me behind the stand for all of the fruits and vegetables. And I loved just that learning piece that I had stuffed for so long and had to be the expert. I loved living in the world of I don't know, but we're going to figure it out and we're going to get it done.
And what's so interesting about that too, and again, I know you personally, but you said it earlier in the session is back in your old days, you were always looking for the next carrot. So now you find yourself in Mexico, an unknown town, different cultures, trying to speak the language, trying to get water delivered. But you're painting this picture of creativity and walking, but there's not a carrot and a stick there. Like, so how did you shore that up going from a life with driven goals and KPIs and OKRs to this space of allowing yourself to unfold however you needed to unfold in that moment?
So I'm not going to say that that achieving piece of me is not still really present. Like that piece loves to come out. It loves to get stuff done. Like when I could get the water delivered and the Pippa truck would roll up and the guy would stand on top of this giant, 10,000 liter Pippa truck and like put the water into the cistern. I was like, yes, I did that. I got it here. And like that checking the box
Yeah,
still felt really good, and to
yeah.
this day still feels really good. But I got to redefine what success looked like, and it wasn't this external metric. It was an internal one, things need to get done, and I knew I had to do those, but others, like, I was just developing myself and doing something that felt really good in the moment. And it wasn't based upon going faster and faster on a treadmill, but not getting anywhere. I always described it. You remember that cartoon Scooby Doo?
Oh, yeah.
And like Scooby and like Shaggy, their legs would start moving, but they weren't going anywhere. I always felt like I had Scooby Doo legs. I'm moving, but I'm
Yeah.
not getting anywhere. And I didn't have to have Scooby Doo legs.
I love that. So redefining success. So I talk a lot about this in my book, actually, because I think there's so much importance to it. I think that we follow a lot of times society's idea of success because that's what we're kind of told is the right thing to do. And so when you're here and you're in this process and you're redefining success, what do you find to be true for yourself?
It's not monetary, it has nothing to do with the title. It is about having deep connected conversation. It is about allowing space for both myself and others to figure out who they are and what their special gifts are that they can bring into the world. Like what were my unique gifts like around this creativity and the beauty of what I could figure out when I didn't know and accepted that I didn't have to know, but I could figure it out. That to me seemed so much more powerful when I could use it with people that I know and love in a, a personal perspective, and I could use it in a professional world. That that felt like success, but it's
Mm,
not the metric that gets recognized a lot. Like being a partner, you're supposed to go in with an answer. And
yeah,
to walk in and for somebody to say, like, here's the problem, here's the challenge, and to say, well, I don't know, but let's figure it out wasn't necessarily a recipe for success for me.
right.
But I loved, I've discovered I love to play in the world of,
World of I don't know. Do you find yourself now, because how far are we out from your initial gap year?
we are 5 years.
Okay. Do you find yourself still vacillating between am I getting the right measure of success? Am I slipping back into old ways? And I'm asking literally not for a friend, for myself, not even for the listeners. Like I see myself doing this when I do my goals for each year. It's like X amount of money. I just put that on there out of habit. And then I'm like, that's actually not my goal. What am I doing? What am I thinking? And then I rewrite myself. But do you find yourself falling into those patterns? And if so, what can you share with us that is sort of the get you back on track mechanism you use?
Yeah. So, I mean, absolutely, I fall into that, and I'll jump to this year because this year has been a complete. I mean, if you were to look at the goals that I set for myself at the end of 24 for 25, I've probably hit one of those goals. Everything else has gone by the wayside, and it's not for lack of trying. I've had a sick kid,
Mhm.
and so I have been really focused on that little human and getting her to a point where she is well. She is, I mean, and we're still there. We're still working on it. It's not 100%. She's doing so much better than she was at the beginning of the year. But if you look at the goals I had set, I didn't hit the revenue targets. I haven't grown my business. I've delivered 2 retreats, which those were on the goal list. Those are the only things that I would say, like, ticked what Suzanne was gonna do this year. And that part of me that is really high achieving and the pushing and the doing will will stand up. And I think to your part, what has helped me is honestly discovering parts work for myself and for my clients. Like, part of me wants to achieve.
Yes.
Part of me wants to be here in the present moment. And how do I cultivate that part that wants to be in the present moment? How do I cultivate that part that is the caregiver and can see? And so the way I manage that is that I can recognize that part of me that wants to be the high achiever and look at it and say, you know what? I get it. We're going to get back there. But
Mhm.
right now, that's not the goal. Success for this year has been keeping a kid alive.
Absolutely. And you're
And
exactly where you need to be in
I'm
that
where
moment.
I need to be. And so it's that ability for me to be able to pause and step back and objectively look at what have we accomplished? And it's before everything would have been, I would have been part of the subject.
Mhm.
Like, the achieving the goals would have been the thing, and not achieving them would have spiraled me out of control. And now I can step back in that pause and say, okay, yeah, we haven't done that. And that's okay because we have done this, this, and this. And they weren't on the goal list last year.
Mhm.
And I go back to it all the time. I say it is the ability to intentionally pause and view what is important to you, what matters most, and are you achieving that versus what somebody else says you should be achieving. And for myself, I know I'm off the rails when I'm living my life like the Cheesecake Factory menu, where I'm
Oh, say more, because I think we've all been there.
trying to be everything to everybody. And
Yes.
I'm like, oh, let me add this on the menu and this on the menu and this on the menu and this on the menu. And everybody looks at the menu and they're like, I don't even know what I want because your menu is 700 pages long and it's confusing. And that's not what I want to be. I want to be the Five Guys menu. I want to focus on burgers and fries and maybe offer like a hot dog or a grilled cheese for people who don't want the burger. But I want to do that really, really well. And so I can kind of feel myself. Am I a Cheesecake Factory menu? Trying to be everything and that, like, idea of running for success? Or am I really focused on what I want and what matters most? And that's the Five Guys menu.
Love that, and now I'm hungry, so thanks for that.
Sorry.
Here we are. But I love that too, because I talk a lot about, abandon in my book. It's one of the spark is the process, as you know, A is abandon, and there are things that we need to abandon, whether it's things we actually do, but more often I find with clients, and I'm sure you experience this also as a coach, it's the stories we tell ourselves.
The
So,
store.
what kind of stories and or other things did you need to abandon to get to where you are today?
I needed to abandon that my worth was tied to being a partner. And whatever that is, my worth is tied to being a role, a title.
You actually used the word deconstruct, which I wrote down because I thought that was so fascinating. You said something about deconstructing your partner role. So
Mhm.
so that actually had to be deconstructed, which shows that it had a foundation, it had walls, it had a roof, it was a thing. So how
Mhm.
did you get through that? That's very hard, and I think so many of us I was terrified to tell my kids I was leaving Google. I thought they'd think I was the biggest loser on the planet, and they were like, "Whatever, you're awesome. You'll just do other awesome things." And actually, my oldest said, "You should do a podcast and help other people." I'm not even joking, and that was, what, 4 years ago now. But yeah, how do you think through that for yourself?
I mean, I think it's hard, and it was hard for myself, it was hard for my clients. Like, I remember at one point I was with a coach. I had been back in the US from the gap year, and I was getting ready to leave the firm, and she said to me, What would be helpful for you to talk about today?" And I was like, I don't know. I don't really have anything." And then I spent the next 60 minutes crying.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Oh, I thought you didn't have anything." There was a real grieving process for that part of my life, and a recognition that the pieces, maybe those, uh, to deconstruct the bricks that made up Suzanne as a partner, I got to pick what bricks I wanted to take into the remodel.
I love that. And what did you take?
I took my tenacity. I
Great.
took my ability to be able to communicate complex problems and pieces of information and distill them down to something that was easily consumable. I took my ability to think strategically. I took the knowledge that I had been successful before, and that probably wasn't like a one time fluke, and I could apply that going forward. And I took the knowledge that I wasn't a failure just because I was deciding to bet on myself. It took a long time for me to, like, come up with that because I was just like you, Stacey. I was like, "Oh my god, everybody's gonna think I'm a failure." I couldn't cut it.
Yeah.
And I really took that idea of, I get to take all the good things about being a partner,
Hmm.
and they come with me. That's still part of me and part of who I am, and that will carry forward. And the parts that I don't like, the running, the hustling, the trying to do things that really didn't align with my values, I could leave that behind.
Mm.
And that
And
was an intentional choice I was making.
well, that's what I was gonna say. It's the power of choice, don't you think? I think people think we build these big careers so that we have all financial freedom everyone talks about, like, or whatever the freedom is. And you get to the top and you're like, this isn't actually freedom at all. This is not my picture of freedom. So there's something there about your power of choice to decide what comes next for you and to be able to transform into a place that is the right fit that fits you and you fit it, right?
Absolutely. And I think when I talk to clients, a lot of people will come to me because they're like, "Hey, you took a gap year. I want to change. I just want to like cut ties and run." And I'm like, "Wait a second. That's not actually the best place to go." Because yes, taking an intentional pause is hugely beneficial. You have to figure out who you are, but I would much rather help you figure out where you're going and what you have to leave behind in order to get there and be excited about it.
Hmm.
Because if you are a person who is going to give 110% no matter what, wherever you go, there you're going to be.
Mm, that's so
So you
real.
can go somewhere new and you're still going to give 110%. You're still going to be the striver. It may not be the organization that is causing all the angst. And so let's figure that out. And then where do you want to go? And make
Um,
that transition with intentionality. And 9 times out of 10, which is the crazy part, the people I work with, when they figure out the role that they are playing in what they don't like and can put up boundaries, they end up staying. They end up finding a way to live into their values, and they're more engaged, they're more connected, they're more energized than they were before they left. So or before they looked at the part they were playing holistically. And I think that's the most amazing thing.
Well, and it's so true because everyone's journey is different. Everyone's journey is different. And so what's right for some person is not right for others. But so that deconstructing, that self-reflection, that taking the time to understand is so rich. And I don't think we do that enough. And that's why I love your hit pause, because I think that so many of us has, I call it the hamster wheel, but you're calling it the Scooby-Doo legs, which I love. we're just going through life, and we're not giving ourselves that opportunity to pause and hit reset. So give me an example what that looks like. I have so many people that I know that are proud participants of your retreats, which are beautiful. Talk a little bit about what that retreat scene looks like and how you bring in that reset, if you would be up for it.
Absolutely. So I think there is a definite difference between a vacation
Mm,
and an intentional pause reset. And it it comes down to intentionality because when we go on vacation, there's a different outcome. There's a different expectation. They're fun. They can be relaxing. I mean, sometimes for me, they can be more work than like when you come back, you're like, oh my God, I'm so stressed from having to deal with that.
true
But when
story.
you when you take time for yourself and you're going on a retreat by yourself or with a friend, the entire focus is on you. And it can feel really, really selfish, especially for women to do that.
Mhm.
But what we do, and when put together and design my retreats, especially the longer one that's in Mexico, we are looking at what is really important to you. Let's reconnect with your values because so many of us, it's hard for us to articulate what our true values are.
Mhm.
Let's investigate those stories we're telling ourselves about
Mhm.
who we have to be, what we have to do. Let's unpack them and deconstruct them to find out what feels true and what feels honest. Once we do that, we can start to envision what might be possible. What do we really want for our lives? What do we want for ourselves? And then put a plan together. And all of that it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. There's also just this beauty in the connection that comes with people being together. We did a retreat. It was a little bit shorter in West Virginia this past fall. I have we everyone laughed so hard. Just 9 women being together, sitting around a campfire, telling stories, being seen for who they are without I mean, nobody said what they did. Nobody gave a
Mm.
title. And it was just people connecting and seeing commonality across other women who were there. Those are the moments when you can just step away. And again, it's like you're part of the subject when you're in the hustle and bustle. When you intentionally pause, you allow that hustle and bustle to become the object and you can
Mm.
see it more clearly.
I love that. You said this word selfish. What do you feel about that word? Because I feel like especially women, so many of our listeners are women, working moms, can imagine, um, selfish. What's about that word for you?
It's so interesting because I, it's this idea of and I hate the trite of self-care is not selfish because it's just thrown around too much. But I do think that and I'm using it broadly as like women, and I know men feel this way as well, but I think more often women tend to feel it more acutely, is that anytime we focus on ourselves, we don't focus on others. And it's sort of they can't exist together. You can't focus on yourself and focus on others. And what I found for women who come to our retreat is it is an act almost of serving others as well. It's like a both and. You're serving yourself by getting more connected and you come back more whole and more grounded and more energized. The first retreat we did in Oaxaca, a woman came. She had been a stay-at-home mom for 13, 14 years, and she was getting back into the workforce, and her goal was, "I don't know what I'm gonna do." A different transition than somebody who's coming out of the workforce or saying,
Right.
but still a transition nonetheless.
It's scary, very scary, I imagine.
Super scary. She was like, "I don't am I even relevant?" Like, that was her big thing, "Am I relevant?"
Yes.
And she came home and she wrote me and said, "My daughter said I came home a different and better mom." And I was like, that's the thing. Like, she took time for herself and everybody else benefited. And so that's where this idea of it's not selfish. We're not just thinking about our own needs and sacrificing everybody else. That time that we can focus on ourselves is in service of others. And I think that if we can shift that, and look, I'll be the first to admit, I just went on my own retreat and I had the same thing. I'm like, oh, I shouldn't do this. This just feels really selfish. And I had to remember, no, you need this. And if you need this, it's going to benefit others on the back end.
I'm gonna probably butcher it, and I can't cite it, so the author in me hates that about it, but, there's this great quote that's something about, like, taking care of yourself or investing in yourself helps others to have the best of you, not what's left of you, and that's always stuck with me because
Mhm.
especially as moms, especially as spouses, it's really hard to balance all of the things, um, especially when you're burnout and drained, which is a place so many of us are in, so that's my next question then, actually, is we would all love to go on a retreat, but if we can't do that, like if you know, if someone out there is listening right now and they're where you were back in 2020 with the burnout, trying to figure out what comes next, what is the advice you give them?
Start small.
Start
Start
small.
small. Because it feels daunting. Like, look, if anybody comes to me and they're like, I want to take an adult gap year, I'm like, I will be your biggest cheerleader. But I know I was privileged to be able to do that, and not everyone can. And yet, many of us all suffer from the same problems. So when I say start small, even 15 seconds of deep breathing allows you to move from subject into object. You're just creating a little space from you and the burnout, you and the overwhelm, you and the to-do list that is never ending. Take a couple minutes of deep breaths. If you can do a little bit more than that, go for a walk. Get outside, get in nature. And don't use, no offense to the podcasts. Don't listen to a
And taken.
podcast. Don't listen to music. Just be in the moment. And it allows our brain to actually refocus. And sometimes, like the problems that you're working on, the answer will come when you're not doing anything. That's why so many of us get great ideas when we're taking a shower or making a tuna fish sandwich or whatever. We're just not
In
there.
class.
Right. It lets our synapses actually connect. Um, Moving on from there, just journal. And if you don't know what to write, write. I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write. Your brain will ultimately think of something. And there's a lot of great prompts out there that you can use to get yourself thinking about, what do I want? What would be really helpful right now? And set a timer, five,
Yeah.
10 minutes. Just write for that amount of time and then put it down. And it's these little acts of pausing that you'll realize the world isn't going to end. It's going to be okay on the other side of 10 minutes. And eventually it'll feel better to take an hour,
Yeah.
to take a 3-day weekend, to go for a week long. But just be intentional about using that time. That's the thing I try to get people to do. And again, what's the smallest step you can take today?
Absolutely. And I think so many times when you are journaling and you are reflecting and you put it out there, a lot of times these old stories or these hard things that are in our brain, saying them out loud or writing them on paper actually takes the power away from them. Like, that's actually not a true statement. I actually am capable. Why am I telling myself that bad story or that negative self talk? So I really love it for that too. I think those are really very actionable steps that are bite sized that listeners can take to move in a direction. So I absolutely love that. One other thing that you said that I think is super interesting, I mean, so many things, but we only have time for so much today, is you said subject to object. That might be new for some listeners. Can you give us a little bit more about that? Because I think that's very, very powerful.
Yeah. So when you're the subject, like, I mean, think back to English class when you were in 8th grade, and we were probably, I don't know if you had to diagram sentences, but I certainly did. And, you had to figure out, like, what is the subject? And the subject is like everything is all about that
Yes.
in the sentence or in the story. It is the defining characteristic. of that particular moment. So if you are in a space where you're like, I am overwhelmed, I have all of these things to do, I am in it, and like you are just, I call it sometimes just pushing the boulder uphill
Mhm.
just to get it done. You can't see anything around you. You are the subject of the story. We all like to be the main character of our own movie. And sometimes when we are that main character or the subject, it's really hard to see what we're doing and why we're doing it. And when you can pause, it's almost like this out of body experience. You get to step back and you get to view the story and what you're doing in the story from just a little bit of space and distance. And sometimes you can go like, well, that's why am I just pushing that boulder up the hill? I
Mm.
don't even know what that's for. And that's when you become the object. Like you step out. Some people say like, are you on the dance floor or are you part of the balcony?
Yes.
And when you're part of the balcony, to now we're going to mix in yet another metaphor. You can see what's going on the dance floor. But
Right.
when you're on the dance floor, you have no idea what's really, really happening. So that's the idea of moving from being part of the subject to separating yourself and just getting a little bit of distance. So it allows you to then make those intentional choices about how you want to be when you are the subject.
That's so good. It's so helpful. Is there anything else? And then I want to head into, I want our viewers to, listeners to know all about the things you're doing because you're doing so much greatness right now. Is there anything else you would want to gift us with before we go in terms of what these experiences have taught you that you could share with others?
I think it's really giving ourselves permission to pause. There is power in the pause, even in these micro pauses. We all want to grow. We all want to, continue to become that better version of ourselves, whatever better means for you. But growth doesn't come from just pushing and doing more. It actually comes when you stop long enough to listen to what's ready to emerge within you. If I hadn't stopped, I wouldn't have heard the voice that said, "Why don't you move? Why don't you do something different?" Like I created the idea of an adult gap year for myself. But if I hadn't paused, I wouldn't have done that. And I think the other thing is like, you don't need to know your next move. Everybody thinks like you have to have it all figured out, and you don't need to know your next move. You just have to make room to hear it.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. And I think people feel a lot of pressure, right? They don't even feel the pressure of the next move. It's like, what are you doing with your life, Stacey? Like,
Yeah.
10-year plan. Oh my gosh, how many more times can you hear that? When I do think there is such power in listening to it and giving yourself the space to see what unfolds,
Yeah.
right?
Unfolding is beautiful. I mean, look at how we look at flowers that open. We don't
Hmm.
know what they're going to look like, and they unfold, and it's beauty. And so, if we gave ourselves the same permission to slowly unfold, who knows who we're going to become?
I love that. All right. Well, I know that this, first of all, look what I have right here. Boom. Here's the book. If you have not checked this out, it's so, 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 so good. There's so many good nuggets in here. I know that Suzanne's got millions of other things to share, but this is her book. Where else can we find you? What else are you up to? Share it all with us.
Yeah, so you can find the book. I'm supposed to be doing this in Adult Gap Year anywhere that you buy books, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all the places. I'm on social media. I will say sometimes it feels like the bane of my existence, but I'm on the Instagram and occasionally on TikTok and Facebook and LinkedIn, offering my little nuggets of insight on what you can get when you pause. And then the next big thing on my list is our Reimagine Your Future retreat that's taking place in Oaxaca, Mexico from February 28th to March 6th. It is an invitation to pause. It's an invitation to reconnect with yourself, and it's an invitation to redesign a future and reimagine it in a way that feels really aligned. We use a lot of the elements of Oaxaca. So we're not only just kind of like sitting at one place, we're getting out into the city. We're seeing and tasting the sights and sounds and food of Oaxaca that is so, so delicious. We're doing some hiking in places that are really sacred to the Zapotec tradition. We hike from the Irvel Agua, which is the picture that's on the front of my book,
Okay.
down to a waterfall called Las Salinas, and Las Salinas is where the Zapotecs believe is the fountain of life,
Oh,
and
beautiful.
it is a magical, magical place. And so we have a few more spots
You
left,
do?
and if
Okay.
any of your listeners would like to join us, you can find all of the information on my website at Vamonos Coaching.
Beautiful. And you're Vamonos coaching on all your socials too, right? That's how we
Yes.
follow you. Beautiful. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. And I know you're a very busy woman, so we appreciate you taking the time. There's so many good nuggets in here. And I think most of all, sharing these intensity points and being vulnerable and saying we don't have it all figured out, but giving people tools and stories is what this is all about. We are in community together, especially in those places we feel most alone. And so I just want to commend you and thank you for being vulnerable, talking about your intensity point, talking about your transformation. And we just feel blessed to have had you on the podcast today. So thank you so much.
Stacey, it was my pleasure.
Take care.